You ever see a woman fly backward like she just got slapped by Zeus? Because I have. And all it took was 54 volts, one HOA president with a clipboard complex, and a legally posted warning sign that could have been read by a mildly literate Labrador. Her name was Marla Kinsey, Ironcrest Estates' self-appointed empress of mulch regulations, and the moment she touched the top rail of my grandfather's electric fence, she took off like she was auditioning for a weather balloon. Hair straight up, clipboard still midair, and me? I had it all on video. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Because when your grandfather is a retired NASA electrical engineer with more stubborn in him than a rusted bolt, and your HOA thinks his bird feeder is a public threat, it's only a matter of time before science answers stupidity. If you're watching this while ducking out of your HOA's latest mandatory meeting, the kind with stale cookies, lukewarm coffee, and a passive-aggressive slideshow, welcome. Grab your drink of choice. Bourbon's acceptable, maybe encouraged, because this story has it all. A senior citizen turned silent resistor, an HOA queen drunk on power and potpourri, and the most polite revenge arc ever fueled by municipal code and Ohm's law. This isn't fiction. This is family. And I know because I'm the grandson. My name's Jason Ward, and I was just trying to visit Grandpa for Sunday coffee. Instead, I walked into a neighborhood war zone. And trust me, the first casualty was common sense. Grandpa Frank had lived on that corner lot since before the HOA was even a glint in some power-hungry developer's eye. After my grandmother passed, he poured his grief into the garden. Tulips trimmed like military ranks, roses that smelled like memory, and one stone bench with her name etched in steel. Peace was the whole point. That is, until Marla Kinsey showed up with her hair helmet, crocodile smile, and a clipboard that might as well have been a sword. First it was the fence stain. Then it was the height of the hummingbird pole. And eventually, this is not a joke, she fined him for unauthorized gnome presence. You don't come at a man's gnome, not unless you're ready to meet resistance wrapped in copper wire. Now here's the thing about my grandfather. He doesn't yell. He calibrates. He doesn't argue. He researches. And when he got 3 citations in a single week, including one for visually disruptive ivy, he didn't call a lawyer. He called the city. Applied for a fence permit, studied the local ordinances, drew up a wiring diagram that would make a Navy tech blush, and 2 weeks later there it was. A beautiful regulation-compliant electric fence, low voltage, non-lethal, posted with more signs than a national park. So when Marla decided to climb it without warning, well, the laws of conductivity answered on his behalf. You better believe there was fallout. HOA meetings turned into gossip salons. Neighbors suddenly had opinions about volts. Marla called it an act of aggression. Frank called it an engineering solution. Me, I called it the best thing I've ever cut on camera. But that was just the spark. The fire? That came next. Because the second Marla realized she couldn't bully her way into Grandpa's garden, she switched strategies. She didn't just want revenge, she wanted his property. And in part 2, she brings lawsuits, fake violations, and a brand new HOA patrol officer who thinks a badge and a clipboard make him Judge Judy. Buckle up, we're just getting wired. Leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, Arizona, Florida, Texas, or whatever HOA war zone you call home. And if you've ever been fined for growing a tomato, parking 2 inches too close to your own curb, or hosting a barbecue with unapproved smoke levels, this one's for you. Hit that subscribe button, because in the next part we're pulling back the curtain on Marla's little empire. And trust me, her clipboard, that's just the tip of the weaponized iceberg. You ever watch someone try to punish a fence like it had personal opinions? That was Marla Kinsey, fresh off her shocking brush with low-voltage reality, marching up and down Ironcrest like General Patton in a pantsuit, clipboard swinging like a mace. If she'd stopped there, maybe issued a statement or held a dramatic HOA meeting with iced tea and veiled threats, we might have called it a draw. But no, some folks doubled down when they should sit down. By Monday, Grandpa got hit with 3 new violation notices, His ivy was trespassing. His garden bench was unapproved furniture, and, most offensively, his ornamental gnome was culturally ambiguous. I'm not even sure what that means, but it cost $150, 0 cents, and a chunk of his sanity. Grandpa didn't panic. He organized. See, he'd spent decades launching satellites, dealing with gravity, trajectories, the occasional exploding capacitor. Compared to NASA, an angry woman in a cardigan didn't scare him, but he knew this wasn't about plants. It was about property, about leverage. And when Marla sent a certified letter threatening $4,800, 0 cents in fines and probationary compliance status, whatever that meant, Grandpa called in backup. And to Lisa Ward, my cousin, civil attorney, part-time firecracker, she took one look at the HOA bylaws and started laughing like she'd found a typo in a ransom note. Turns out Grandpa's property was what they call a legacy exemption. Built before the HOA was even a sparkle in Marla's perfectly lined eye, his lot wasn't subject to half their aesthetic micromanagement rules. Fence colors? Doesn't apply. Gnome population? Immune. The HOA had no legal teeth in his soil, and Lisa had the paperwork to prove it. We drafted a formal appeal citing case law, grandfather clauses, and state property codes so dense they could stop a bulldozer. Grandpa even attached a printout of Marla trespassing, full color, high resolution, labeled Exhibit A, The Queen in My Tulips. 3 days later, things got spicy. A meeting was called. Emergency session. HOA board. Marla showed up, wearing her Sunday best and a face like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. She tried to dismiss the exemption claim, but even the HOA lawyer, Marcus, a nervous man who sweated through his collar like it was policy, started shifting in his chair. He mumbled something about needing to reevaluate standing. Translation, they were bluffing, and we just called. But rather than de-escalate, Marla escalated harder. Like a cat climbing higher up the curtains to escape a vacuum, she started sniffing around Grandpa's fence again, this time with her husband Robert, a city councilman with more connections than spine. Now, I know what you're thinking. She must have realized she was outmatched, legally and electrically. But no, she tripled down. Started patrolling the street in a luxury SUV, snapping photos from behind tinted glass like she was filming a sequel to Rear Window. The citations flowed faster than HOA dues in April. Grandpa started a violation of the week board in his garage, but the pressure wasn't breaking him, it was galvanizing him. The more they pushed, the more he dug in, not with anger, but with calculation. And in part 3, he stops playing defense, because when Marlo brings in a fake HOA patrol officer named Mike and a scheme that smells like racketeering in khakis, well, let's just say Frank doesn't just respond, he counterattacks, with spreadsheets and circuit boards. Stay tuned, the voltage is about to spike. By the time HOA patrol officer Mike Dawson showed up in a fishing vest with a homemade badge and a clipboard thicker than a Baptist hymnal, I knew Marla Kinsey had gone from nuisance to full-blown folklore. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was writing scripture. She'd assigned Mike the job herself, which is impressive when you consider the position didn't actually exist. But that's the magic of Marla. She didn't see bylaws as guidelines, she saw them as suggestions, to be rewritten in Sharpie if inconvenient. Mike circled Grandpa's yard like a mall cop at closing time, scribbling notes, measuring our rocks with a contractor's ruler, and my favorite, citing non-conforming tulip spacing. I didn't know flowers could violate boundaries, but apparently they now had zip codes. It didn't stop there. Marla sent out glossy flyers to every mailbox warning of a volatile electrical hazard at the ward residence, complete with a photoshopped lightning bolt zapping a stick figure off a fence. The caption, "Is your family safe?" Meanwhile, she was caught on Grandpa's camera snooping through the backyard at dusk, crouching behind his rose bushes like a raccoon in pearls. But instead of retreating after being busted, she escalated, brought in a contractor to disable the threat. He took one look at the warning signs, read the fine print, and bolted faster than Mike on lawn inspection day. She still issued a violation the next morning, obstruction of HOA intervention. I swear, she makes Orwell look like a lifestyle coach. Lisa, of course, was digging deeper. With her usual cocktail of caffeine and case law, she started tracing every violation that had led to a homeowner selling under value in the past 2 years. And guess what? Most of those sales ended up in the hands of the same real estate group, owned by none other than Marla's brother, Craig Kinsey, a neat little monopoly built on fear, fines, and gnome citations. Marla wasn't just a power-hungry HOA queen. She was a petty tyrant with a side hustle in land flipping, and a legal vulnerability big enough to drive Mike's patrol golf cart through. But the real gold mine? Grandpa's cameras. They'd caught Marla bending stems in his garden, snapping them for evidence, kicking over a solar light, then documenting it as unsafe decorative lighting. It was HOA gaslighting, with a tripod. Grandpa didn't react. He archived, quietly, methodically, like the electrical engineer he'd always been. And as the footage piled up, so did the statements from neighbors, seniors, widows, longtime residents, each with the same story. Marla would fine them into a corner, then recommend a buyer who'd generously offer cash at 30% below market value. This wasn't rule enforcement, it was psychological foreclosure, dressed up as code compliance. By the end of the week, Lisa had compiled a dossier thick enough to serve as a doorstop. She called it the Kinsey Playbook. Fake violations, fabricated invoices, a landscaping budget so inflated you'd think Iron Crest had been redesigned by Versailles. But the piece de résistance? A scanned HOA memo with Marla's signature, authorizing accelerated compliance targeting for non-compliant legacy lots. That's HOA speak for go after the old folks first. And suddenly, it wasn't just about Grandpa, it was about all of them. And in Part 4, we take this circus to court. Subpoenas, screenshots, and a surprise witness even Marla didn't see coming. Spoiler, she's about to find out the only thing more shocking than 54 volts is a courtroom with a working projector. Stay tuned. It's showtime. You'd think a woman with a clipboard-induced concussion would take a step back and reevaluate her life choices. Not Marla Kinsey. Nope, she went full Shakespearean villain, with a lawsuit as her monologue. The official charge? Intentional infliction of emotional distress and booby-trapping community property. You read that right. The same fence she illegally climbed over without permission, despite 5 warning signs, was now a public hazard, and the cherry on top? She wanted $50,000 and a written apology from Grandpa, in cursive, preferably framed. That's when we knew this wasn't a property dispute anymore, it was theater. Grandpa didn't blink, just smiled, patted his folder of evidence like it was an old dog, and said, "Time to return serve." Within 48 hours, Lisa filed a counterclaim: trespassing, harassment, HOA overreach, and, her favorite, violations of the legacy exemption clause. See, Marla didn't realize that Grandpa's house, being older than the HOA itself, wasn't subject to the aesthetic tyranny she was dishing out. It was like trying to ticket Mount Rushmore for not having the right paint scheme. But Marla never read the fine print. She just barked over it in bold font.
The court date hit the neighborhood like a backyard fireworks show. Loud, dramatic, and with more popcorn than legal precedent. The local courthouse hadn't seen this much action since the golf cart DUI scandal of 2017. People showed up with lawn chairs, Ruth brought lemonade, someone brought folding fans labeled Team Frank. Marla arrived dressed like a discount senator, her expression somewhere between smug and spray-tanned panic. Her lawyer opened strong, talked about dangerous conduct, electrical aggression, and psychological trauma caused by a militarized fence. Lisa stood, rolled in the TV cart like it was 1994, and pressed play.
The footage? Devastating. There was Marla ignoring posted signs, scaling the fence like an HOA ninja and staging violations like it was an audition for desperate bureaucrats. But the knockout blow, Greg Kinsey, yes, her husband, walked in, took the stand, and calmly dismantled her reputation like it was IKEA furniture missing 3 screws. He admitted it all: the shell companies, the kickbacks, the spreadsheet labeled Target Zone listing elderly homeowners she'd bullied into selling. When the courtroom gasped, Greg just sighed and said, "She called it strategic enforcement. I called it extortion with landscaping." That was the moment Marla cracked. She stood up mid-testimony, accused Greg of betrayal, shouted at Lisa for orchestrating a coup, and tried to grab the remote to stop the video playback. The judge didn't flinch. He just banged the gavel like he was starting a rock concert and said, "Sit down, Mrs. Kinsey, or sit in holding." And just like that, the courtroom became a reckoning. Not just for one woman's ego, but for every neighbor she'd tried to bulldoze with bylaws. In Part 5, the empire starts to crumble. And the paper trail? Oh, it's about to lead somewhere criminal. The funny thing about power, when people start to lose it, they don't let go. They clutch it tighter, like a squirrel gripping a firecracker. And Marla Kinsey? She gripped that fuse with both hands and a smug grin. After the courtroom debacle, any reasonable person might have stepped back, regrouped, maybe gotten a little therapy and a gardening hobby. Not Marla. She doubled down with the grace of a blindfolded peacock on a trampoline. Her next move? She called an emergency HOA meeting. Not to apologize, not to explain, but to propose a bylaw that would retroactively ban electric fences and fine residents who contributed to community unrest. In other words, Frank—
You should have seen the flyers. High gloss, triple color printouts stuffed into every mailbox with phrases like "defend our values" and "danger lurks behind decorative shrubbery." One neighbor thought it was a recall ad for lawn fertilizer. Nope. Just Marla trying to rewrite history while the ink on her lawsuit was still drying. She hosted the meeting herself in the HOA clubhouse, sipping lemon water like a dethroned queen plotting her comeback. When questioned about the legality of the motion, she simply replied, "Leadership means making hard decisions." The only thing she led that night was an exodus. Half the room walked out when she pulled out a list of probationary properties, all elderly owned, all recently fined, including Barbara's, including Ruth's, including Frank's. Meanwhile, Lisa and I were pulling on threads, and when I say threads, I mean emails, receipts, Venmo logs, zoning paperwork, everything that had a whiff of Kinsey corruption. Then it came. A padded envelope dropped at Lisa's office, no return address, just a single sticky note. Check page 42. Inside, a flash drive, a treasure trove, internal memos, doctored invoices, fake contractor signatures, all tied to 3 other HOAs across the county. Same handwriting, same scam, same Marla. Turns out Ironcrest wasn't her only playground. She'd been franchising her HOA tyranny like it was a pyramid scheme with grass clippings. We presented it all at the next town hall, standing room only, with neighbors leaning in like it was the Super Bowl, and Lisa was the quarterback. She laid out the network: dummy landscaping companies registered to her brother, HOA, emergency funds rerouted through shell accounts, and personal purchases, oh yes, filed under community morale. One was a $4,300 0 cents espresso machine labeled Resident Wellness Equipment. Ruth muttered, "I got a Keurig and sciatica. Where's my wellness?" The room went quiet, then absolutely erupted. People who hadn't spoken in months were now comparing fine totals. And what did Marla do when confronted with the evidence? Not apologize. Not resign. No. She showed up late, stormed to the front, and screamed that it was a personal attack orchestrated by anti-community radicals and a geriatric propaganda machine. She literally called Frank a weaponized retiree. Then, and I swear this happened, she tried to call for a vote to fine the entire room for unlawful assembly. The only thing more ridiculous than the motion was that she actually believed it would pass. It didn't. Instead, Barbara stood up and announced a petition to dissolve the current board and demand a forensic audit. 72 hands went up. Marla stormed out, clutching her clipboard like it was a baby that had betrayed her.
But the real nail in the HOA coffin? That came in the form of an email from the district attorney's office, responding to Lisa's evidence submission. They were opening a formal investigation into misuse of community funds, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. And, while subpoenas were being typed up, Frank planted a new set of tulips along the fence line. "Might as well make it beautiful," he said, "if we're going to watch a regime fall. Stick around, because in Part 6, the Queen finally tips her crown, and this time it lands in court." By the time Marla stood in court, her clipboard looked more like a liability than a badge of power. Her pearl earrings didn't gleam with confidence anymore. They hung like little nooses. The woman who once marched around Ironcrest, barking citations like a suburban drill sergeant, now sat stone-faced, flanked by a lawyer who had the look of someone charging $600, 0 cents, an hour to delay the inevitable. Meanwhile, Frank sat calm, sipping from a thermos like he was just there to supervise a plumbing inspection. The whole room could feel it. This wasn't just the end of a bad chapter. It was the final punctuation in a book no one wanted to read again. The DA's case unfolded with the precision of a Swiss watch and the punch of a courtroom drama. First came the emails, Marla's own words full of backhanded threats and asset-chasing glee. Then came the ledger. HOA funds rerouted into shell companies, some of which had mailing addresses that didn't even exist. But the real gut punch? The testimony. One by one, neighbors who'd once been afraid to hang Christmas lights took the stand. Ruth, Barbara, even Greg Kinsey. They spoke of fear, intimidation, and coercion, dressed in the polite language of compliance. Greg's voice cracked when he read the spreadsheet labeled high-value targets. Nobody in the room needed a translator for what that meant. Then it was Frank's turn. No fanfare, no theatrics, just a man with a steady voice and a stack of receipts. He laid out the entire timeline, from the first phantom fine to the footage of Mike the Clipboard Dawson's unexpected flight. He didn't accuse, he explained. Every action, every boundary crossed. And when he said, "I didn't build a fence to keep people out, I built it to keep integrity in," even the judge leaned forward. You could hear it in the room, that shift from watching a trial to witnessing a reckoning.
Marla's defense unraveled like cheap Christmas lights. Her lawyer tried to paint her as misunderstood, overzealous in her passion for community standards. But passion doesn't explain offshore accounts or forged inspection records. It doesn't explain 20 grand spent on emergency pond aeration during a drought. It definitely doesn't explain the fake electrician or the vote to fine residents for unauthorized empathy. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, the silence in the courtroom was so complete, even the HVAC system seemed to pause in respect. But justice wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Marla was sentenced to 5 years, fined $125,000, 0 cents, and banned from holding any HOA position for life. The board was dissolved. Frank was offered the presidency. He declined. "I'd rather fix sprinklers than people," he said. But what he did do was help rewrite the rules. Transparent elections, public budgets, oh hey, power, limited by actual law instead of a clipboard with delusions of grandeur. And you know what happened when the bylaws changed? So did the people. Neighbors started talking again, sharing tools, swapping tomatoes instead of threats. Turns out, you clear the weeds, things grow. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. That integrity doesn't come with a title. That real leadership doesn't bark, it listens. That when someone wires a fence, it might not be to shock you. It might be the only way left to protect what matters. If this story hit home, If it made you laugh, think, or maybe want to check your own property lines, go ahead and click that like button. Leave a comment, share your HOA horror story, and don't forget to subscribe because next time we're telling the tale of a man who got fined for fishing and responded by buying the lake. Yeah, this ride isn't over. Not by a long shot.